Hello, this is a small unscripted video or vlog style, also called a live video that is not live, number 2005. So Ephraim is starting to go into the kindergarten now, and what is interesting for us is that the nursery teacher, the Kindergärtnerin, is clearly saying that Ephraim is very trusting, so he trusts new people quite quickly, and he also has this trust that when we go, we come back, which we already developed over the course of the last months, slowly and progressively. But it seems like he will slowly go more and more into the kindergarten without any drama, which is very good. And of course we are doing it in a way where we take our time, and fortunately we have this freedom to decide how much time we do and how much is good for them, different from other people who just cannot take this amount of time because of their working conditions. But what seems quite clear is that Ephraim has he feels quite safe also with other people, and I think for me that's very, very important point, which is of course how did he grow up in his first months, that he got a lot of security from us and all these things that I already talked about, like we didn't put him in a stroller he hasn't seen a stroller for the first half year of his life or even more, I don't even remember, but we were always carrying him and blah 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 and all this stuff. But that's not really the main point, because I think it's almost obvious things that if you give a lot of love to your child and you're there, then it will have a positive effect. But another effect that the nursery teacher is also noticing is that he's quite smart in how he interacts with the objects around him, and that he can do things that other children might not be able to do at his age, not necessarily on the level of talking or something more bigger than this. There he's like very normal also when he learned to walk and stuff, but the experience he has with lots of different situations seems to be a bit different, and I think the thing is this, that we let him do many things, like I discussed already with my friend Simon Pooley in our YouTube live event some time ago. Video that is online. You can watch it on my channel if you want. So the idea is to let the child do, and the idea is that the child is motivated by itself. You don't need to motivate a child. A child is motivated by itself. I think the problem is mainly that people demotivate their children through letting their children not do many things. And I think there are two problems here. First of all is that there's this idea of how things are done. So what you do with this and this object or tool, what is the right way to interact with this? This is one thing. And another thing is the fear that the child will injure itself. And the third thing would be, and that's very important, I think, that people somehow seem to think that all the experiences are already in the child and they just have to say no often enough to make the child choose the right behavior. So let's say that the child is not allowed to throw something to the ground. Yeah. So you just say no until the child understands, okay, not allowed to throw things on the ground or whatever. But it seems to, like, the idea of people seems to be that children can just rationally understand this, but we all understand this through experience. So if you, as a child, you throw something to the ground, then you experience very basic things, of course, like gravity, but also like the sound, and you experience how the different materials and shapes, how they interact with the crash on the ground. Some things break, some things don't break, and so on and so forth. It's like the analogy with the hot stove, that you need to touch the hot stove once to experience it properly. And of course we try to prevent the injury, but if you try to put your child into this kind of cage where there's no danger anymore, and where also there's no danger to the objects around, then you take away a lot of experiences. So what comes into this thing is, first of all, the belief of people that how things are done properly, so how you interact with an object, like what do you do with food or with a glass or something like this. Then also the cultural thing, like how do you, what is allowed to do culturally, like how shall children behave and what not to do, and the danger, and this idea that children, or the misunderstanding that that children do not need to experience things, but children need to experience things by themselves, and they want to try and they want to do things themselves. This is the only way we learn. Everything else is just receiving some information, like, for example, the stove is hot, don't touch it. This is just some information, but it's not a real knowledge, because there's no real experience with, which in this case is perfectly fine, because of course there's no need to touch the hot stove, just because some injuries you don't want to get. Yeah, like I also don't need to try to jump out of a high building and have severe injuries, because I can rationally understand that this is not a good idea. And this is a very important layer, but there is a layer below it where there's no risk of injury, or where just some objects could possibly break, and then to let the child experience this, I think it's very important. And also to let the child experience or let the child do things that are different from how we see things, because the child has not the cultural layer of how things are used and how things should be done and all of this. And to let the child experience the world with his or her own eyes, and combine the objects however the child wants, and play however the child wants, and not say, no, this is done like this, don't do it like this, blah, 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 blah. But many people, I think, are doing this. And this is, like Nietzsche would call it probably the slave moral, the slave moral. Yeah, which is that you act in a way of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and it doesn't come from you, from your decision of what you feel is meaningful and right, but it comes from the culture around you. And I think this takes away a lot of important experience from the child, because the child is growing through this practical experience in the world, for doing things, trying, and our role as parents is to help the child, to protect the child as much as needed, but that's enough, as much as needed, so that there's no big injury or something like this. But of course we all know there are injuries. Some things happen, sometimes the child falls, and okay, this just happens. But to try to avoid big injuries, and then to be there and help, again, as much as needed, but not more. And then to have the other layer where we fully engage with the child and do things and stuff like this. This is not the layer I'm talking about. Of course, this is super important, like that we're there fully engaged and play and do all this stuff. But I'm talking about a bit different layer where the time when the child is trying by itself, yeah, when it tries to climb somewhere up, and instead of lifting the child up, you let the child try it by itself, and if it wants help, I help. But if he doesn't ask for help, why should I do it? Why should I help if the child wants to try by themselves? So let's be attentive of this. When is our action helpful and needed, and when are we overreacting, overprotective, or over-culturalistic? Good, okay.